Well, welcome and good evening on a hot summer day. As you can see, as you go in and out of buildings and so forth. First of all, congratulations. You'll be the first graduating class of the Eastern Oregon Teacher Academy. So this is kind of what you would consider the pinnacle of getting acclimated to education frameworks, education protocols, but understanding education as a culture. So it gives you an idea of just looking beyond the whole, do I want to be a teacher or do I want to be a school psychologist, a school social worker? Do I want to work with students with trauma, students with needs and barriers? Maybe I want to get an undergraduate special education degree and work with functional or adaptive or gifted, or I want to work with students with autism spectrum disorder, or I want to be a coach, or I want to be an instructional assistant, or do I want to be a paraprofessional? This academy is designed not to be a summer camp, but it's designed to give you kind of an academy enrichment experience to build you into the status of being an alumni from this opportunity, so that we can bring you back maybe someday and you can work as a guidance counselor for future academy participants, or you could work as somebody who presents because you got out and became a teacher post-academy. So there's a lot of really good opportunities that you're going to experience this week. One, I encourage you to kind of start creating your mindset around the word pedagogy. Pedagogy means the art and science of teaching. Right now, you're going to be experiencing other pedagogical frameworks, other people with pedagogy that kind of might not be your pedagogy. So think back to when you went through K through 12 education, or if you're currently in that model, and think, I really liked how that person taught. I did not like how this person taught. Well, you get the opportunity to build your pedagogical framework throughout that process. And so you're going to be experiencing a lot of different kind of lenses of experts in the field, through PhDs, through researchers, things like that. I went through a Grow Your Own Teacher program in Wichita, Kansas. And it taught me that even when I went through, the district could not fill teaching vacancies. And so they had to grow their own teachers, kind of like people grow their own food. And so when they grew us, we had to sign contracts to teach at that district. So where have I taught? I taught inner city Wichita, Kansas, very poor students. I was an ELL science teacher. I taught elementary, so I taught second and third. I taught 8th grade biology and 9th grade, where I taught in a rural school. So I've seen rural, I've seen urban, and then I moved up to higher ed so I could be a teacher of teachers, which is what I really wanted to do. And that's when I really got to expand my own pedagogy, tell real stories. Like when I was an elementary teacher, I taught in an elementary school that I had 33 second graders. That's a big class with budget cuts. If you ever hear the word budget cut as a teacher, you've just now been initiated as a teacher. My aunt started teaching in 1954, and she said the first thing they told us was budget cuts. So she said I learned to ignore the word. So I taught in an inner city school with some very challenging kids. For example, one day I'm getting ready for Saxon mathematics. If you ever have to teach Saxon, then you need to go leave the teaching profession maybe and go change tires at Les Schwab. No, I'm just kidding. So it's a different kind of mathematics. In the morning, we served all our kids breakfast because we had a big grant because our kids often didn't eat but one meal a day, which was a lunch. One day I had a kid named Hario come to school. He took his backpack off, set it on a table, and now Hario, he smelled good, looked good, and he unzipped the backpack and pulled the baby out and set it on the desk. Well, I walk over there real quick and pick the baby up, and I look at the baby and I go, Hario, what do you have here? And he goes, that's my baby sister. I'm like, well, why did you bring your baby sister to school? I'm like, is she breathing? Is she blinking? And I'm still conducting teaching. Okay, put your backpacks in the trash bags. Because you always put backpacks in trash bags in my classroom because of head lice. We had head lice year round. So I pick up the phone and I call our social worker, Lauren. I said, hey, Lauren, you need to get here. I start mathematics in 10 minutes. I have a baby in my classroom. And Lauren hung up. I was like, dang it. So I called Lauren back. I'm like, no, Lauren, really, I have a baby in my classroom. And he hung up. Well, we always played pranks on Lauren. So finally I called him again, and the baby was crying. And so he came and got the baby. And the mom came and got Hario, and we finally asked, why did you bring your baby sister to school? He goes, I was going to watch her all day. I didn't want to. I wanted to come to school. So that kind of gets you into the mindset of, okay, now, how do I separate that? Why wasn't I part of an academy that taught me about that kind of stuff before I became a teacher? There was no book. There was no rule book on, oh, if you have a child who brings a kid to school, here's what you do. Like if you would say, if you have a child that eats glue and paper, the first thing you do is this, like a flow chart. When I moved up to 8th grade, I was at the poorest middle school in Wichita. It's called Pleasant Valley Middle School. And someone on my team was a mathematics teacher. And Scott said, I'll give you one bit of advice. Always buy a yearbook. And I'm like, well, why? So you can see which of your students end up in prison. I was like, what? I mean, we were a large gang-infested middle school. So if you roll up my sleeves, you can see a set of scars here. There are perfect lines in the shape of fingernails. One day, in the hallway, girls from a local gang in the school, which was called Vata Local Girls, VLGs, they have Mi Vida Loca tattooed right here with 3 dots. One girl planned a fight to jump another girl, she was a PFL, Players for Life. These girls got in a condensed circle, we called them, where the girl that was kind of jumped, the other girls locked arms around them with their backs facing her, and then here came the other group, and I reached in to pull the girl off the ground, and the other girl got my arm because she spent her lunch sharpening her fingernails to points. Well, the girl that got me was an amazing student, and her sister was one of my top students, but I had to testify against my own student, saying she's a good kid, this is just bad. And there she is looking at me, and I'm like, don't kick her out of school. She's a good kid. And we were able to get her through a system so we could save her into the school system versus like, we're gonna get you out. So there were other situations. One time it was a Friday, and my classroom phone rang. I didn't have caller ID. And it was a person down at a detention center. And he said, this is Officer so-and-so. We actually have Estella so-and-so retained. But she's only asking to speak to you. She doesn't want to speak to family. So I call my dad, and I'm like, do you know where this center is? He goes, yeah, I know where it is. And I'm like, I have no idea why I'm being called to the center. And he goes, did you do anything wrong? I'm like, no, I've never had a speeding ticket. So I go down there, and I met with a gentleman. He says, a judge wants to talk to you. I'm like, what? Oh my gosh, I grade all my papers. You know, I'm a good teacher. And so I go into these quarters. The judge is not wearing a gown. He doesn't have a gavel. He's just wearing a shirt and tie. And he says, do you know Estella so-and-so? Yeah, I have her in 8th grade. She only wants to speak to you. She's being detained. I'm like, okay, what happened? So I go glass to glass, phone to phone. She's in an orange jumpsuit. She goes, do you think I'm a good student? I'm like, yeah, you're a great student. She goes, can you testify that I'm a great student? I'm like, yeah, what happened? She goes, I'm tired of living with my family. My mom harbors gang members. I live a rough life. I have an aunt that lives in Albuquerque who's a hairdresser, and I want to go live with her. So I met with the judge. I said, she's amazing. She's impressive. She's a good kid, great record. She's a CB student. You always say A student. She's not. Well, today, she's a beautician in Albuquerque. She thinks her life was saved. So teaching comes with many different factors. You know, many different forms. Like, I always gave really hard exams in 8th grade because I did not believe in extra credit. Because I was an adjunct at a community college. So I always put like chemistry problems on the test to see if they would solve them, or high-level math problems. Well, I had a student that sat in the back of my room, 5th hour, which was before lunch. She always faced the wall, very small girl, always had tape on her glasses because she didn't have a lot of resources to get new glasses. And so one time she did the test, turned them in, she solved an algebra problem, which was above high school. So I went down and saw her math teacher. I said, what kind of math are you giving this student? And she said, typical math. I said, start feeding her some upper level honors stuff. She goes, why? I said, I think she can do it. So she did. She comes to my classroom weeks later and goes, she can do it. We're like Goodwill Hunting, before there was Goodwill Hunting. So we start feeding her mathematics and stuff that she could do. And so it came time for conferences with parents. And she had a twin brother, which was in the other science teacher's class. So I sit down with the translator, the dad, and her and her brother, and we explain, your daughter could go to Harvard, Yale, if she gets the right coaching. Mathematics is easy for her. And the dad in Vietnamese said, not looking at her, she was here, her brother was over here, and he says, we don't care about her. We care about him. Make him that smart. And we knew the failure had set in. So we worked with high school counselors to get her into systems because she didn't have the family support systems. She went on to college, but she was a first-gen kid like I was a first-gen kid. But sometimes as a teacher, you're going to learn through this, every day will be a new day. If you don't like that, then get a job doing the same thing over and over again every day. But as a teacher, it'll be a new experience every day. As a teacher, every day before you walk into the classroom, you're going to have to inhale confidence and exhale doubt. Every day will be a new day. But because you as a teacher, there will be a kid in your class that will get a haircut like you. They will buy the same perfume or cologne as you. They will find out where you shop. They will follow you because they want to become you. You know, when I worked as a teacher, I usually worked 3 jobs. I was a classroom teacher. Then at night I was a tutor at what's called KANZEL, Kansas School for Effective Learning, where I help people get GEDs. 99% of my students at KANZEL were high school females that had dropped out because of pregnancy, teenage pregnancy. But they wanted to carry on their lives. But they couldn't because they had to stay home and raise a baby. Or they were court-ordered. So, and then on the weekends and other evenings, I was a college adjunct teacher. So I taught college chemistry, anatomy and physiology with a cadaver lab for pre-med majors. So I could get access to free dissection tools and supplies to bring into my classroom because I had no money as a classroom teacher. So I could get resources. But some of the skills that you're going to acquire, you're going to hear stories that are going to scare you, kind of like, I don't know if I want to be a teacher. The thing is kids need teachers. Parents need teachers. Communities need teachers. You know, teachers don't make what a cardiothoracic specialist makes. You know, you're not going to make what the head football coach at the University of Oregon makes, but you'll change lives that you'll have no idea about. Like, for example, I was probably 4 years in as a professor, and this office says there's a girl that's trying to get a hold of you from Mexico. I'm like, what? Her name's Estela Diaz. So finally I call her back, and I finally get a hold of her, and she goes, hey, I wanted to thank you for helping me get my GED. I'm now a nurse in Mexico City in a hospital helping homeless kids. But she goes, if you didn't stay late and help me with math and science, I would not be here. She went back to Mexico to help other people. But I had no idea I had that impact on her. The same impact that when I finally got her done with her GED, she came by my classroom and goes, when do you get off? I said, oh, I get off at 8 o'clock. She goes, I need you to come by my house. My mom has a gift for you. And I was like, no, conflict of interest. You don't have to give me a gift. She goes, no, you helped me get my GED. And as a single mom, it's a big deal in my family and my culture. So I was like, okay, just write your address down. I thought, I'll just stop by. When she wrote her address down, I go, she either lives in a basement apartment or she lives in kind of some side building, because if it's got a letter or a half, they don't live kind of in the main floor. So I knew where she lived. She lived in North Wichita, which was a large kind of a Hispanic cultural area, which is a beautiful area. The architecture is gorgeous. It's the best food you're ever going to eat. And it's just really a good environment. So I drove down the neighborhood, no street lights, and I finally saw her residence. It had an orange bulb, and it was a garage. I was like, oh. So I go in, and it's dirt floors. But you would have thought that it was Chateaubriand. And I look over, and they had a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. I'll never forget it. It's like tilted over, nothing under it. I look at the Christmas tree, and she goes, it's not going to be a good Christmas this year for my son and my sisters. So it was her son, her grandmother on the couch, cloudy TV, you couldn't even see anything on it, 3 teenage sisters, and mom's in the kitchen. Mom comes out with a bread bag, steaming hot to touch, and she goes, my mom made you tamales. And I looked at her, and I grabbed these, and I go, oh, great, can you come here real quick? I go, I can't take your food. I work 3 jobs. I'm a teacher. I can't take your food. She goes, you take our food, or you're going to insult us. And I was like, okay. Went home, called everybody I knew. Guess what? You're going to be Santa this year. Every perfume sample you got at every store that you've got in a box somewhere, you're going to throw that in a sack for me. You're going to go get gift cards. You're going to get, if you're not using something that somebody gave you inside a box, give it to me. And I put this all over her porch one night when it was really late and dark, and ran off and drove off. And she stopped by because my secretary, Rosa, knew her because Rosa translated for me. Rosa, I helped get a GED so that she could teach her high school kids who dropped out that if I can do it at 55, you can do it. And I would stay late helping Rosa. And Rosa said, you have a card. And it was from Estella, and it said, you made our Christmas. Like they knew. I was like, busted. So being a teacher, there's never a crazy impact. Where it hurts is I was a professor at Emporia State. Favorite restaurant called Little Mexico. I go up to order my food, and there's a picture of a teenage girl missing Linda Tran. And I go, ugh. I was her 2nd grade teacher. And I go, what do you know about her? And it was starting to, the corners were peeling. The tape had grunge over it, so it had been in there a long time. I go, I was her 2nd grade teacher. I have a printer's box at home where you put artifacts. I still have a pewter lizard and a little rock she gave me as a gift. And they were like, her mom came in here as a single mom and 9 kids. I go, yeah, I know her mom. She just disappeared. Went off with some teenage boy from East High School, and he murdered her. We found out later. And here you go from these bright eyes to these tragedies. And you're a teacher. I'll never forget the time I was riding a bike down in Wichita, down in what's called, down by the Riverwalk. I rode by a kid and stopped. And I was like, he was homeless. And he recognized me, and I recognized him. And I was his 3rd grade teacher. And I was like, do you need any help? But he was so out of it that I thought it could be kind of a dangerous situation. We had a student, 5th grader, who's on death row, who didn't get the resources. There are things you think about. Those are negatives, and then there are some positives. But as you go through this academy, you frame this to a point like it should scare you enough that if you don't make the change, who will? And so I say this to the future teachers of America, or the future counselors, or the future building administrators. What will your life's work be, and how will you help others in a hurting world? And that's what we're kind of needing in education. There'll be times when you complain like, it's too hot in my classroom, or the school food is terrible. But it's food for some kids. I mean, we had a kid one time, he was so mean, he was skinny, and finally Gina Pierce looked at him and goes, she's never ever raised her voice in her life. She goes, I don't get you, what's wrong with you? You're mean all the time. Took 2 fists, threw them on the desk, and goes, I'm hungry. We dug into it and found out his dad and stepdad were giving him 2 ketchup packets a night to eat. So he was going to bed eating acidic ketchup, waiting to get to school to eat, stealing from the tray to feed his brothers and sisters, which we let him. Because when you sent the food back, in America, you throw it away instead of giving it to people. Let the kids take all the extra dregs and get them, and then they eat lunch. And that was their meal. From 9 to 4, that's the only window we had to feed these kids. And some of these kids were so gifted and smart, they knew who worked at Quick Trip. Quick Trips are in the Midwest. They knew who worked at Quick Trip that was from their neighborhood that would let them steal, and they would turn their backs. They knew when they could steal. These kids know which businesses had side outlets to charge smart devices or phones or things like that. They knew where to get free electricity. So we had schools in Wichita called Gateway, one called Griffinstein that we called Frankenstein. Griffinstein was the elementary school where kids went that they couldn't go to prison because they were in 1st grade. So it took a lot to learn those types of things. So you sometimes think a lot of degrees from this dean. Every degree I've ever got after was because I chose to go after it. My parents never went to college. Sisters never went to college. They worked blue collar workers their whole life. I had to choose that I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be a teacher. Never stop learning. Sometimes I miss the classroom. I miss my own experience in a school lunchroom. The smell of pine sol and fear, you know. You get in line where they serve you like you're in prison as you go through. In France, they feed the kids. Kids are not allowed to feed themselves. The chefs come around and feed the kids. They make everything from scratch. So, there are times when you can invite kids to your classroom to eat, where they think that's the greatest moment ever, just to eat in the teacher's classroom, you know, and things like that. As you think of your journey, do I want to be in elementary, middle, or high school? You know, if you're in high school, you know, it's a different game. Think about when you were in high school. Think about a class where you had a teacher that said, read all the chapters and answer the questions at the end of the book. And you were like, that's not a great way to learn. If I were a teacher, I'd do it differently. That's how you change it. I wanted to teach the way I was never taught. That's how I taught. You know, where are my friends today? Some are still teaching. Some have left teaching, gone on to be professors, or gone on to do different jobs. A lot of my friends from college are teachers. Moved up to be athletic directors or business administrators or things like that. So the K-12 culture and environment will change you. Trust me. It'll reshape you. I had a teacher, I had a principal in middle school. She was the toughest person ever. She used to wear these shoes that they were called SAS, like SAS. We called them stealth. You'd never know when she was coming into your classroom. She'd be teaching, lecturing, and look over, and there she'd be sitting and go, did I cuss? Hope I didn't. And like I asked her, what advice do you have for me as a first-year 8th grade teacher? She was standing in the hallway with her walkie-talkie, and she came up to me and she goes, from bell to bell, give them hell, and walked away. And I was like, that's the worst advice I've ever had. I thought she would be like, do poetry or do other sessions. It wasn't like that. She's gone on to be an avid leader, an advancement via individual determination. I was the first avid teacher in Wichita for middle school science. So things have changed through different types of prospective mindsets that happen. So in a minute's left time, I'm going to close with the fact that teaching will change you. I was a high school wrestling coach forever. And I get a message this year. Matt, they call me Matt, Dr. Siemears. Thomas Carmona died of COVID. I'm like, no. I was his wrestling coach. I'm older than him. I coached him in '98. He has 3 kids at home. How's a younger person than me, his coach, dies of COVID? Whoa. So these connections. Andy Rexroad went on to the Naval Academy. Ryan Boning went on to the Naval Academy. A lot of my students who went on to go to community college and things like that. Did I ever get any special award? Well, I got Alumni of the Year at one of my universities. I don't know if my students did anything. I got put in the National Teacher Hall of Fame. All awards I wish I didn't get, I could have given to my students. Especially, when I walked into the ballroom for the Alumni of the Year, and they had ice sculptures, I hadn't even wrote a speech. I didn't take it seriously because I tried to practice humility. So my advice to you is when you walk out of here after this camp, you're the first group. This was my dream. When I interviewed, I said, I'm going to bring a teacher academy here. You're the first. And I think the first teacher academy in the state of Oregon ever. So it's going to be an honor that we keep you as a memory, the first group to go through, to be part of this, to be advocates, to turn into senators someday, to pass House bills, Senate bills, laws. You're the first group. So drink it up. Enjoy the climate. And we've got a lot of lunches prepared for you that were actually your former school lunches, so you can remember what it was like to be, no, I'm just kidding. We have liver and onions every day for lunch. Your favorite, with macaroni and cheese. No. So enjoy it. I present to you again Friday on 9:30. It's going to be a tough one. It's called The Guts of Teaching. I'm going to dip you into a hard environment so you can see it, and I'm going to pull you out and explain some stuff to you. And I'm going to make you, in groups, talk about what you witnessed and what you would do. And it's a true story. I'm going to show you an actual clip of a documentation that I've been using a long time. And then you're going to have to think, what if that happens to me? I'm like, oh, well, that was Wednesday when I was a teacher. That what you saw is just Wednesday morning. It's nothing. So EOU appreciates you, and we want you to be part of our systems and our futures. And enjoy your time. They're all yours. Yeah.